All right. Want to welcome you guys to the Playsheet Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Jackson, the publisher and editor at PlaysheetSports.com. And I'm always joined by special guests, but I'm joined by another special guest this evening, and Owen Schmitt, former fullback for WVU, the Seattle Seahawks, Philadelphia Eagles, and the Oakland Raiders. It was back when they were in Oakland. It's kind of have to correct myself now because they're the Las Vegas Raiders, but you played whenever they were in Oakland. And Owen, how you're doing this evening?
Doing great, man. Doing great. Trying to stay on the ground. It's a little windy out here tonight.
That it is. You're still dressed in UPS attire, and I gotta say, UPS is probably my favorite delivery service. That those other guys, I always have trouble with them. So I appreciate the service you guys do at UPS.
Absolutely appreciate that, and we're here to serve.
Absolutely. Well, as I mentioned, you very a very accomplished background in football, and as many people know, I'm an Eagles fan, and you played for 2 years for the Philadelphia Eagles. Those were some really fun teams, and I kind of want to get into some questions. The first one I want to go to your Twitter account because right before the Super Bowl, you tweeted out your support for the Eagles, a picture of you whenever you were playing fullback for them, and it's funny because this Super Bowl was an interesting one because it pitted your former head coach and Andy Reid against the team you used to play for. So take me through like that process of going through the which team to support. Obviously the Chiefs and Andy have been on a really good run these last couple years, but you sided with the Eagles this time. Take me through that.
Yeah, well, there's some connections in history on both sides for both teams. Uh, even maybe a little more so with the Chiefs, just because back in my playing days with River Falls, the Chiefs used to have their training camp at River Falls in the summertime. And we had gone up when I was little, so I had seen some of that. So that's a little extra tidbit of the Chiefs' knowledge there. But yeah, Andy Reid, obviously former head coach, been doing great things with that organization since he's been there. Really, he's been great, wherever he's been, whether that be when he was on the staff at Green Bay under Mike Holmgren, and that coaching tree, which, I started out with Mike in Seattle and then, go to Andy. And there was a lot of obviously crossover with just terminology and X's and O's and stuff like that. Andy's a great coach. So is Mike. Respect those guys, an immense amount. My grandfather, that's like Mike Holmgren's like, that's basically meeting Jesus in his book. So, you know, it is. When I grew up watching Packer games, so obviously that lineage of football, which spans, you know, way far back in the history of football. But obviously I went with, you know, I've been watching a lot of the Eagles. I had a good buddy who was still playing for them last year, Jason Kelsey, who we met, my first year with the or second year with the Birds. So got to you know just been kind of following his career, and then this year, just you're always going to have some sort of interest with the team you formerly played for. You're going to take some pride. You obviously put a little bit of work in for each one of those organizations, so you're going to root for the ones you got to play for. So I was definitely rooting for the Eagles this year. It's been awesome to watch their run game. They've had a monster O line. Jalen Hurts has been tremendous. It's been fun watching Saquon run behind those big boys, and you know what a blowout of a Super Bowl. I mean, they absolutely dominated the entire game. I mean, you can control the line of scrimmage, right? You control the game in both sides of the ball. That's exactly what they did.
Absolutely. I had the opportunity to actually go down there for the game and because it's always been I love football and I love the lore of the Super Bowl. I mean that's I like watching the America's games and just all the different things. So to actually get down to one, it's always been a bucket list. And whenever you can go down, whenever it's your favorite team, it's super special. But it's funny you kind of hit on Mike Holmgren because you kind of lead me into my next question. You got to play for Mike Holmgren, who was a disciple of the West Coast offense, and
Bill Walsh, yep.
yeah, he was a quarterbacks coach when Montana won an MVP and was there for two Super Bowls, and he had Favre and won a Super Bowl there, and led Seattle to a Super Bowl. And you had Andy, who I think has been to six Super Bowls now, including with the Eagles, and then you had Rich Rod, and all these guys. I don't think you can tell the story of football at any level without them, because they're considered offensive innovators at just various different levels, and they've done it. They've had a lot of success with it. Over the last 40 years. You played through all three throughout your career. So just what is it about those guys that just kind of allows them to be at the front of these offensive movements? Because like I said, Rich Rod, everyone kind of still talks about what you guys did at WVU almost 20 years ago, and then Mike, and then obviously what Andy's doing right now with the Chiefs and has done over the last 25 years. What is it about those three guys that you kind of just having being able to have played for them that really that they just put it all together and they're just really the best at their craft.
Well, they know what they want. They know what they're looking for, right? And I think that's what they do with their players. They know their schemes in and out. It's like making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. They've done it 1,000, multiple thousands of times, millions of times, if not. And they understand their schemes and what kind of game they're trying to play, and who really what they can do the best with what they do. If you look at all, really all those coaches total, each one of them really has one of the uh, their main guy is their quarterback. That is their ball player. If you look at, um, Mike to Andy to even Coach Rod, I mean, the quarterback position is just so vital in those schemes. Yet at the same time, they're not this. They're not all having the same role. Brett Favre wasn't a runner. He was a guy who could sling the ball around, had a great release. Threw the ball harder than probably anybody ever has in the history of football, or at least to him and me. I still believe that that's what he does. I mean, he was a definition of a gunslinger. He would fit a ball into a tight window. I always, liked listening to stories of like the receivers talking about just how fast he would throw the ball and how it would feel like the threads would literally cut their fingers catching balls from him. And then you have, that guy, which Andy's basically kind of like behind the scenes in Green Bay, massaging that whole deal. You know what I mean? And he's like understanding that, obviously knows that position, is really working with Favre a ton, and then kind of seeing the yin and yang between um, Coach Holmgren and Andy Reid. And you go on like YouTube and stuff, and you see all these like behind the scenes things, and then really how everything starts working and all the inner workings of the Packers at the time. And now fast forward my life, I went to a training camp when I was super young, and a Packers training camp, and a lot of those coaches that were there were in Seattle when I got drafted. I know I'm jumping kind of all over the place right now, but this is a massive like
I enjoy it,
coaching
man.
tree root system. You know what I mean? How the world is all connected. It's crazy. But and then you see obviously Andy goes to Philly. Obviously a little bit different version of what they were doing in Green Bay with his wrinkles. And then you have, quarterbacks like Donovan McNabb, Kevin Cobb, Michael Vick. Um, obviously Donovan having the longest residency there in Philly with Andy, but like and then Andy's basically he's massaging that quarterback position, teaching and molding those guys into what they got. And now you see he's with the Chiefs. He has exactly what he wants. I think as far as somebody who has kind of like all the intangibles in Patrick Mahomes, just a smart player, smart on his feet, knows when to run, knows when to get rid of the ball. Um, and then, kind of step away from that for a second and go back to my college days where I'm with Rich Rod. And, you see a guy like Rasheed Marshall and Pat White under the helm of him, uh, and see like just the dynamics of how Rich's offense works. And then you see, look what happened. Really, wherever he went, the quarterback was really the dude. Whether it was Michigan, Arizona, right? He's had stints a couple other places as well. And then just most recent, Jacksonville State, where he had an absolute stud playing quarterback. So he's been able to find them, and he's very, I'll say this about all three of those guys. They obviously have an eye for talent and what they like. A lot, they say, great minds think alike. I'm sure to some point they all do. And listen, everybody kind of picks, and it's like a multiple fruit tree where everybody's grabbing fruit from the same tree, but it's like, I mean, it might just be little different variations. So it's been amazing really being able to kind of just sit alongside those gentlemen, be able to see what their world's about, see just the knowledge of the game, and the way they process it versus the way you process it. Obviously, as a fullback, I don't process this. I don't process it like a head coach or a guy who's been a head coach for yada yada years, an assistant coach. But he's got such a vast knowledge of football over decades, multiple decades of football. I grew up in a football household. My grandfather was a coach for 36 years, and just the knowledge that he's acquired, and then I got to kind of see and grasp, and it's wild to see all the similarities, but yet it's the same thing, right? It's football. You think it would be, and it is to some point very rudimentary if you look at it from the basics that it has been, but it's been awesome to see the innovation at every level.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things I was thinking about when I asked you to be guest. I was thinking, man, like he has such a diversified background in playing for like all these guys that were just at the forefront of all this innovation. What have you kind of taken away from those guys? Because you're an assistant coach at Greenbrier West now, and the program's been extremely successful. They have a long history of it, but you've been able to come in and help, and they've had some really good running backs there. But just kind of taking away from those guys and just how they teach. I hear so many people talk about Andy and just how he teaches it, and I'd have to imagine, with Coach Rod and Mike as well, just the way that they're able to teach things, it's very similar in that manner, and that they're really good teachers. But what have you taken away from those guys that you've been able to apply in your coaching career?
Well, just like I said, a lot of those guys think alike. They're all three very different coaches. Um, Andy, for the most part, very soft spoken. Never really ever even heard him raise his voice, honestly. You know what I mean? Except for maybe in the meeting room or just to get us like, quiet real quick or something, but nothing like, yeah, I mean, it's amazing to see the difference. And then you got a guy like Rich Rodriguez, who's full of piss and vinegar. And, I mean, you're not going to challenge, what he knows, because he knows the game of football. He's a true competitor. He, uh, he is a guy who is going to tell you how it is. And then you got Mike, who brief time with him, but you kind of got the feeling that he really wanted it done the way he wanted it done. He had probably mellowed out at that point a little bit. I was right at the end of his career, but I have heard stories about when he was with the Packers, and he could definitely put a boot in somebody's butt if he had to. So really all different styles, but things that I've taken away is I really enjoyed the intensity of Coach Rod. I like the energy and, like I said, the charisma of kind of his coaching style. Um, you know, Parents might not like all of it, you know what I mean? But I really enjoyed it. It was fun. It was very it was hard edge. Yeah, I mean, I can't say anything else. I mean, he is literally, that is his thing, and that is really what it is. It is a hard edge mentality. And then I'd say with Andy and Coach Holmgren, just the biggest things would be being able to really connect with a player. And at that point in a career, just a different kind of way you conduct your business when explaining things to a player. You know what I mean? As far as, out and about, you're not just, it's not so much about, and I'm not even saying this is how they were doing it in college, but in college, it's a lot more vocal. And, I'll say this, maybe some guys at the top level are a little sensitive about getting their butt chewed in front of all their peers. So those coaches just have a better sense of, how to communicate, things they need to get, to those players. I will say this, coaches knew they could chew my ass, so they would do that openly on the field. It wasn't a big deal. But I'd say some of the coaching style that I take from those guys is definitely that of Coach Rod. And then those guys just trying to really connect with the player and understand what he's trying to do. At the high school level, we're single A. You know what I mean? Very few kids have really expressed major interest to go play college football. So I think my biggest thing is I remember my high school days. I loved playing football. I tell those guys all the time. I was very fortunate to be able to play as long as I did the game that I love, the game that I love to play. So that's more of the style and approach that I'd take probably in the high school, which would be more like a Andy and a Mike deal. They were just better at conducting the business on the field.
It's funny you talk about Rich Rod's energy because I don't know if you've ever seen this commercial. It was back whenever he was first coaching at WVU, so it's probably 16 or 17 years old. He shot it for a bank where he's just going through and he's hyping all like the bank tellers up and
Oh
everything.
yeah,
You've seen
United
it?
Bank.
I love that commercial, and that recently resurfaced, and I had forgotten about it. So that's kind of like what I envision when I think about him. That I kind of want to move on to that 2010 season. You were signed by the Eagles to replace Leonard Weaver, and I think it's funny because I think this is actually the second time that you had replaced Leonard in your career, correct? Because I think he was with Seattle at one point, wasn't he? Yeah. So
Yeah, he was with Seattle, and then he ended up going uh, to Philly, and then he had a terrible career-ending injury, and then they called me, and yeah, it was crazy how
uh,
that all worked out.
So that season, I up until probably this year, the 2023 season, like even the Super Bowl winning year, I always thought that offense to me was the best Eagle offense in history because of, the guys you had with Mike and LaShawn and Jeremy and Deshaun and, Brent. A lot of people don't talk about Brent, but Brent was an 800-yard receiving tight end the year before. But, there's so many iconic moments, the Monday Night Massacre. But the one I want to talk about is the miracle at the New Meadowlands because that was a game.
Oh boy.
That's the one that's really seared into NFL history. So you guys are down by three or four scores in that one in the fourth quarter with about 7 minutes to go. Is there ever really any point where you kind of think that it might be over? Because I'm watching the mic'd up of the Super Bowl, and whenever Mahomes gets strip sacked there in the fourth quarter, they're just kind of like we'll be back. They kind of resigned to it was probably over at that point when you're going through this game and you're struggling, was there any ever a point that you got guys kind of gave, were like, yeah, this might not be the one, or because of how explosive the offense was, you thought that you really had a shot to get back in that?
Yeah, honestly, with that team, it was a great honor and a privilege to play with, such a band of characters. I mean, we had some absolutely high explosive offense of players on our team. And, you know, I'd say once we kind of got the ball rolling in the fourth quarter and started kind of, things just started happening our way. We just started like putting points on the board. Um, there was obviously doubt at halftime. We were playing pretty bad. Obviously, that year was a you know a pretty solid year for us as far as we had Kevin, and then Mike steps in. Now Mike's the guy. We're not playing that well, on that day, and then all of a sudden we end up starting coming back. And I think the biggest thing was, as far as the doubt thing, it, I don't know. It was kind of I'll say this, that team was very reminiscent of the team I played on at WVU. And I'm not saying that WVU team was better than that Eagles team. I'm saying that the same type of belief that I had, that I really probably every fan had at WVU, while we were playing there, because that's the way the players felt, is we were never really out of a game. I had played in some comebacks in Morgantown that I'd been a part of with a guy that was like Michael Vick, Pat White, obviously. So, you knew you could get something going if he could really put the game kind of on his shoulders. But we ended up coming back, and then I think the end all be all was really nobody truly believed we were going to win until that guy kicked to D-Jack, and it was like surely they're not going to kick to him. I mean, he's like the most dangerous threat, like in punt returning at the time. Like, not only is he on the outside or in the slot position, but you know, he can do, like, the guy is just, he's a freak. I mean, he was absolutely a stud, hell of a ball player, hell of a competitor. Um, a lot of fun to play with, and like I said, very electric player. So in a on a team of electric players, he was kind of the guy. You know what I mean? So, uh, and they kick it to him, and it's like, oh man, and then you're like, all I can hear is Chris Berman in the background. He could go all the way, man. You know what I mean? And and he does, and I remember us obviously rejoicing in the locker room, but that was a good celebration, because that was a hell of a comeback, and what a way to end a game.
Do you have a favorite story from that year and that team? Because to me, that team was so special. Obviously they ended up losing to the eventual Super Bowl champion, but I really thought that entire year, just, when healthy, the only game that you guys really lost was that one to Chicago, and Chicago had a really good defense.
Yeah.
They played in the NFC Championship game that year as well. But when healthy, you had everybody together. It just felt like an extremely special team. Is there a favorite story that you can recall from that team? Because like I said, there's so many iconic moments from that one.
A lot of iconic moments. You know, I would say, and kind of really just going back to what I was talking about, that feeling, like, I felt what you felt is exactly what I felt. It was a very special team. Um, and like you said, when healthy, we could do anything. Marty Morningwig is an absolute genius. He was really fun to uh, kind of just see how he managed his offense. Love scoring touchdowns. They love getting the ball out. They were very down the field uh, oriented, mindset. Um, and it's hard to really pick a moment. I mean, there was obviously special moments during games. A lot of the big games that we did win, but for me, there was small moments personally. Getting to score. I mean, I remember my dad got to come to that game. He lives in Colorado. He got to come to that Houston game that we played,
Thursday night game, right?
and ended up, huh?
That was a Thursday night game, right?
Yep, it was a Thursday night game. End up scoring, and I at the time lived with some buddies, or a buddy that played football with me, Phil Plank, at the time, and I just remember it was like we had, to me, I had won the Super Bowl that night. My dad and I, my buddies, we all had a great time, and Philly was a very special town. Um, just a good vibe, man. Great. Obviously, downtown life was a lot of fun. A lot of great food, a lot of great culture. Um, I lived in the burbs. I was a Delco guy. I lived in Alden. I was the burbs guy. Um, yeah, we were. It was some good times. I remember taking. Uh, I think it was like Riley Cooper, Jason. I think Chad Hall was with us. Mike Kafka. We all went down to some of those. I think we might have even stopped at Barnaby's or whatever down there. But
Yeah.
it was a good time. We had some fun, and it'd be hard for me to pinpoint one moment, but those are great moments that you did.
Absolutely. Did it kind of feel like at home when you were in Philadelphia just because Seattle wasn't as dynamic of an offense, but I look at a lot of similarities. Philadelphia didn't really use Mike in the run game, in the design run game as much because, he was injury history and guys get paid a lot more when they're up there. You want to protect your quarterback. But that was the year where LaShawn really kind of had his first breakout year and just kind of built off that success. And
Pro Bowl year.
yeah, very, very dynamic offense and a lot of similarities. So did it kind of feel, hey, like this feels pretty familiar? It's the times when you had Pat and Steve.
Oh yeah, I mean that's what I meant. Like that was the closest I had ever really felt to the backfield. Well, the team in general, and then if you talk about just backfield, um, Shady one of the best, and obviously Michael Vick one of the best, and really kind of the guys. A little bit different style than Steve. And Vic has an absolute cannon of an arm. I mean, he's got one of the smoothest releases that I mean, it's got to be the best. I mean, and just the smoothest release ever. Looks effortless, and then he throws a 70-yard bomb on the money, just like what he did at the massacre in Washington when we beat him like 80 to whatever it was. I mean, we scored on the first play. I remember. I mean, just it was a very fun team to play for. All those guys are great dudes, and like what you're pointing out a little bit too is about what did we, feeling like the same. Um, I just had there was just a confidence about that team. I mean, we never felt like we were really anybody was really better than us, like you said, except for injuries. But that was the same with West Virginia too. I mean, one of our guys are banged up. I mean, you're a little worried about how things are going to go, but it was absolutely explosive. I mean, if one guy was having a bad day or they're double teaming a guy up trying to take away DJ Avant and Macklin, would make plays, on their sides, and Brent Selleck would make his plays too as well. So, tremendous offense, a lot of fun playing, very explosive. Um, Probably my most productive year. Well, definitely was my most productive year in the NFL. I felt that like um, Andy really, they didn't, obviously I didn't get a ton of stuff, but they really sprinkled me in there enough to do what I could to help the team. Yeah, I think LaShawn that was his first Pro Bowl. I think I even got like an alternate that year. So like it was a big deal for me to have a year with those guys. And then kind of unfortunately the next year we had the strike and Philly changed a bunch of stuff up, and Marty went to the Lions, and it was we kind of broke the band up, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's interesting because I always this is why Jason's probably my favorite player in franchise history because I remember that really well. Because coming off that 2010 season, I thought you guys shored up the D. The only move that I really didn't like was firing McDermott because I thought a lot of the issues with the defense in 2010 were more so personnel based. I thought that Sean was and I think he's proven it where now with the success he's had in
Yeah.
Buffalo. But I thought it was more so personnel based, and you bring in all the corners and it looks really good. The pass rushers, Jason Babin and Colin Jenkins were really good on the defensive line. And the best acquisition of that entire offseason was a sixth-round rookie in Jason Kelsey. And it's funny, I've always kind of referred to Jason as, he's a fullback playing center. Just you talk about it, you hung out with him, you're pretty good buddies with him. Did you kind of know from the jump that he was going to be pretty special?
Yeah, I mean, just athletically, you could kind of see that he stood out from, uh, yeah. And Mike McGlynn was the guy who was before him. Well, he was a pick guy.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of shit talking back and forth between the two of us. But Mike's a great guy. But yeah, you could kind of just see Jason very good hips, uh, very powerful. Wasn't the biggest guy on the field, but what he lacked in size, speed, and strength was really his forte. His footwork was phenomenal. He's played a lot of different sports, hockey. I know he's played some lacrosse. I don't know if he's played, uh, not collegiate. I think club maybe and some high school stuff. I think that's what he's done. So he's obviously an athlete and has been able to uh, that was really his bread and butter was his footwork and his ability to be able to turn his hips and run. And then really, he's super good at finishing against those linebackers and stuff. And you got to remember too, the game changed a little bit too. You know, back in the 90s, linebackers were 255, 265. You know, in that era of football right there at the late 2000s, defensive fullbacks started get or linebackers started getting smaller. You were seeing more like 235-pound guys. The fullback was kind of getting phased out, uh, but more athletic linemen. And now, if you look like today, like if you see their line today is probably the most athletic line, or at least, that you can definitely put your run from. I mean, look, they're the champs, so
Hmm.
they've obviously got it done. There is, some maybe comparable players out there, but as far as across the board goes, they have like the best O line in pro football right now.
That's always been my thing is as an Eagles fan I've always appreciated growing up through just trench building because the only times that they've ever been bad is when their entire offensive line's been hurt. But to your point, Lane Johnson, I think he played quarterback and tight end, and Jason Peters, who you played with, was a tight end. He was an athletic freak.
Yep.
Mailata was a rugby player, and Cam Jurgens is an athletic freak as well. So yeah, it's kind of insane. Being an Eagles fan and living amongst the population WVU fans, I see a lot of similarities in the fan bases. Down to the way they idolize players and appreciate them. I think that's one of the reasons we talk about Jason. Talk about yourself as well. They both fan bases just seem to really love those blue collar guys. Having been embedded in both those communities, do you kind of see those similarities? Because I really feel like they're like right here as far as as far as how the fan bases are very similar.
Oh, absolutely. And listen, I'll say this: when I was in Seattle, media wise and coverage was very thin. Maybe five or six reporters, in the locker room. In Philly, I almost had to pinch myself. I mean, dude, it's like there was 30 reporters, 40 reporters in the locker room after the game. I'm like, oh my gosh, what is going on? You know what I mean? So it's people want to know what's going on inside the organization. They want to know, up to date news. They want to see players playing hard. And I think that's what you get with a lot of the guys that, that's the, kind of quality of player they're looking for. They're looking for guys that work hard. And, I know the lines are kind of crossed. Once you get to the pros, you're getting paid a bunch. So the blue collar tag kind of comes off you, but you come from a lot of those mentalities. where you got a hell of a work ethic, and then now you're talking about professional blue collar boys. You know what I mean? Guys that strap it on for a living and and play their butts off, work hard.
Yeah, absolutely. Rich Rog's back at WVU, and we hit on that a little bit. You had the opportunity to go up there, and I saw that they had invited quite a few legends. I think Steve Newberry from Monroe County was up there too. Can you just talk about the excitement of Rich Rod being back? Because I know you're a big advocate of him as well, and the success that he's had, and you've really championed him, and just with the excitement of it, just talk about kind of what your trip was like and the experiences you had up there last week.
Well, it was great. Just getting some time to sit face to face with coach and just kind of BS a little bit. The old, quote or pun or whatever, let his hair down a little bit, even though he's, that whole deal. That's the inside joke if you've ever been there. But uh but it was great to see coach. It was great to see the facilities. It was great to see what WB's built. Um, it's exciting for me as a player, playing in his era, to kind of see him get to, finish business, so to speak. You know, College football is a business. And obviously 20 years ago, I think wholeheartedly, he truly says he made a mistake. I think he did. But guess what? There's, how can you can't fault a guy for, and I'm not really making it about that, but I mean, you guys taking a better opportunity. It is what it is, and we got to remember too, he was a young coach. He was a young coach when he was with West Virginia. I mean, there's a lot of time in between when he's been here till now. Dang near almost
It's 20.
what has it been?
Almost,
Huh?
it's almost been 20 years. 'Cause what was it,
Almost 20.
17
That's what I'm
years?
saying. So, that's a lot of time in between stops, and to be able to see kind of how he's like nurtured and grown and matured in his coaching career has been nice to see. And I just think it's time. Uh, there was a, you know, it, we talk about the blue collarness, right? And I say the hard edge, right? Coach
Yeah.
Rod's hard edge. We haven't really seen that the last, few years. I mean, I wouldn't say, I'd say even for a while now, like more than a few, maybe like 4 or 5 times a few. Um, and you just haven't seen that style of play. So as a fan base, it's frustrating when there's a guy, you know what I mean, and there's issues with whatever had happened in the past, but I hope people can get over that and really embrace the basically the reculturalization, if you wanted to take that as a word, and bring this hard edge mentality back to Morgantown and WVU as a whole. Like, I just can't wait to see that, because I know that alone is wins. The confidence that it inspires you with is something that has to be just seen by the players. You have to be indoctrinated into the system and understand and embrace it. It comes with the territory. It will be there. You just have to be willing to put in the work. The system works. I'm not saying it's foolproof, but if the team has bought in, um, it's a special thing, man. It's a special thing.
It's interesting. You talked about it, but just you realize going back, like maybe I should have handled things differently. Kind of going back to that time. What was kind of the sentiment in the locker room? Because I look at it now and I'm just like you're championing for him. Pat's one of the guys that's like bringing back, and obviously he's brought a lot of guys back on coaching staff. So I don't really think that there's too harsh of an opinion from the players. But what was it? What was it like at the time? And if there were kind of any harsh feelings from the player standpoint, for you, when do you think you kind of came around to the perspective of, hey, like, he kind of made the decision that he thought was best for him. And, I kind of get it. And, just from a fan perspective, I get it too. Yeah, Michigan was a blue blood, and they still are, obviously. But that's the job that if you're any young coach or any college coach, you kind of think of it like that. But just from a player standpoint, what was the feeling at the time, and if there were some kind of harsh feelings, at what point do you think you kind of came around to it?
Well, for myself, senior year, so a little bit different for me than some of the younger players, I'm sure. Um, Honestly, I want to say I was pretty, not going to say over it, but I understood it because I was really starting to see that college football was a business of coaching, and these coaches were starting to get paid money, big money. You know what I mean? Like multi-million-dollar deals, and understanding that we were kind of a hot thing, during that period of time. I mean, he was selling views. He was Thursday night, ESPN in it, and we were getting big ratings, and we were selling. He was selling football. He was selling a brand of football that he coached, and a bigger fish, so to speak, in Michigan, took the bait and threw an offer out to him. He had a chance to go to Alabama the year before and didn't take it. So he just went with his gut. That's what he personally told us. But and then this year, you just never know. It's a coach and a young mind. You know what I mean? He doesn't know. Obviously he thinks that West Virginia is the end all be all. It's the alma mater. You know what I mean? But it's hard to. Sometimes it's hard, man, when people are dangling 3-4 times your salary in front of you. You know, I mean, how do you say no to stuff like that? So um, and honestly, if you can't get over it in 20 years, man, just go watch another team. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you can't forgive somebody for something like that, it's been 20 years, get over it. We just want to see our boys win. You know what I mean? Represent our school in the right way.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. I see it there in the background, but NCAA made a return last year. You were one of the four cover athletes in 2009. And coincidentally enough, one of the other ones was actually Deshaun Jackson.
Yep.
Tell me about that experience and how much, if at all, that you play the game, because that's, I think that's really unique to get a fullback on the cover. And just to be on NCAA, like I'm sure, you played that in your youth. You played Madden. And it's like, man, like here I am, like I'm on the cover of NCAA for the PSP.
Yeah. Played a lot of NCAA. Especially, junior, senior year of high school, and then into college. I mean, it was like that's what you did. I was so obsessed with it. I was changing, that was before they had the names and stuff on there. And dude, I was putting names in. I was all in. I was sold. And what's really crazy is, heck, you can even ask my roommate from River Falls, Troy Foss. I was always a West Virginia guy because they just had a dynamic offense. And Rasheed Marshall at the time and Chris Henry, that dynamic partnership there was a toss up. You just throw it up to him and he'd go make it happen for you. Um, but loved playing the game. Was really awesome when I did get uh, the opportunity to go. I got to go with Deshaun Jackson, and we went up to the spot up in Canada there, and got to check out the facility, how the games were made. Sometimes you get to see the commercials with the people in the suits with the little green balls all over them. We got to see that live action, kind of see how all that went. Got to play some games. It was a hell of an experience. Very awesome. They also gave me these. They gave each player like these shoes that said "Cover Boy" on them.
Lost you there for a second, but yeah, you're just talking about the cover boy shoes that you got for being an NCAA, and that's really awesome. What are some of the other things you have there in the background? Just pointing out quickly.
Oh man, I got my first touchdown in the NFL. I got the Cole helmet they gave me on the McAfee show. I got a broken face mask over here. Just some, picture of me and Waylon, my son. Just some trinkets, some odds and ends from the playing days.
That's awesome. Kind of speaking of your playing games, I got two questions and I'll let you go. But who's the best player that you feel like you've ever played against? And this could be high school or college or NFL. Usually there's somebody, and especially for a player like you, where you did a lot of hitting and you doled out a lot of punishment. So I'd imagine that the guy, whoever you're gonna say, is probably gonna be one bad dude.
Um, I enjoyed playing again. Well, personally, I enjoyed watching Megatron when we played Georgia Tech. I thought that was he had an absolute. I mean, they just basically threw the ball up to him and he was catching it every play. But got to obviously watch him in the pros too as well. I mean, he was doing the same thing he was doing in college to the guys in the NFL. But the guy I played against, I'd have to say the most fun guy to play against, linebacker wise, was probably Taquito Spikes.
Oh yeah, yeah, former Eagle and Bill.
Yeah, he was playing linebacker for San Fran at the time. Well, it was like him and Patrick Willis. They they had a pretty dynamic linebacker crew back when I was playing there. So I'd say those guys would have to be great. But I mean, I got to play, Julius Peppers, uh, you know, Demarcus Ware. As far as some of the ends go, Zach Thomas was a fun one to play against. Um, got to go against, play with Erlacher, but I would say definitely probably Taquito and Taquito Spikes and Patrick Willis on that San Fran team. That was always a good battle.
It's funny because I remember in 2011 and when you guys played them, I think that was Navarro Bowman's rookie year too. So they had both those monsters as well with Willis. That was a really good defense with Justin Smith. So yeah, there's some really good players you listed off there. Last question I have for you. What's your best joke? You have a dad joke or something that you like to tell the people?
My best joke, dude.
Hey, your best joke.
Ah, I man, off the top of my head, that'd be hard. I'm more of a comeback guy, you
Okay.
know. Or, man, I'd probably say my best dad joke is look in the mirror.
I like that one. I tell all my guests my favorite one is did you know that they made the round bales of hay illegal in West Virginia? Like those ones that you see on farms. They made them illegal because a cow can't get a full square meal.
Oh wow, that is a dad joke.
I heard that one years ago and it cracks me up every time. Owen, where can the people find you on social media? I know you're part of the Inside the Gun podcast with Jed Drenning. A lot of informative stuff, on WVU, and Jed is still really, really embedded in that program. Does a lot of work up there too. So, where can the people find you and listen to you?
Yeah, in the gun podcast. That's my podcast with Wes and Jed, and it's a podcast about West Virginia football. It's called In the Gun: The Significance of Jed and I's playing days with under Coach Rodriguez. Um, and if you're in the look for a podcast that is, if you want something that's ultra informative, we also have a guest speaker on our show, Phil Steele, who comes out with the top 25 college football preview every year. They do, it's not a sports betting thing, but they talk about overs and unders, Big 12 football. Um, you know, to be honest with you, Phil Steele's, an absolute genius when it comes to football and the scouting and all that. And Jed, if watch one show and you'll understand the magnitude of Jed Drenning's brain capacity and power to be able to retain, you know, thousands of years of information. But it's a very informative you know, program about WVU football. I give a slight bit of comedic relief. Wes kind of wrangles us up and keeps us on track. It's good stuff. We usually do about one episode a week, throughout the year, and then once football ramps up, we do about two. Sometimes we get a little bit crazier, a little bit, and we might have multiple shows, more than two a week. But great show to watch, and that's In the Gun podcast. That's where you can check me out, and yeah, that's what I'm doing now. Doing that, smoking some barbecue, and having a family.
Hey, the good life though overall, man. That is a lot of fun. Yeah, you and I were talking about it before we got on here, but you were putting down your kids right before the show, and I was putting down mine as well. So yeah, that's life for us these days. Absolutely. Well, I want to thank Owen for joining me today on the Play Sheet Sports podcast. Once again, Owen, thank you again. I really do appreciate this. And I'm your host and editor, Tyler Jackson, of Play Sheet Sports, and we'll see you next week.